my limited experience with New Zealanders is working with the New Zealand military because I used to be in the Australian Army for about 11 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I've hung out with your infantry boys before, tough motherfuckers, and funny too. Oh, bro.
Classic Kiwi banter.
Oh, dude, they'll rock up for an attack like, oh, bro, we going already? Um, they'd and also the other thing that I wanted to point out before we started is that Tracy McLaughlin, our regular photographer, is a native New Zealander, and she is an enormous fan of yours. Now, I'm going to butcher this, so I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but she said she's from the same tribe, Rukoa.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and while she doesn't speak Tereo, again, please apologise any pronunciation issues. While she doesn't speak Tereo, she feels a deep connection to the music, and she just thinks you guys are the best thing since fucking sliced bread. So
Dope, dope, dope. Shout out to her.
yeah, man. Um, so yeah, look, going back to, I mean, obviously you've only been in for about 6 years, but we'll just talk about in your experience in your time in the band. What kind of responses did you get from Maori elders and community there?
Well, the boys actually talk about this because the very first time they played the first Māori song live, it was during the RockQuest competition, which is like the national battle of the bands sort of thing, high school band competition.
Mhm.
And when they went on stage, that was their first thought, was like, oh man, what are people in general going to think about this? But what are the old people going to think about this,
Yeah.
And Henry particularly always talks about when they finished their set, this bunch of old men at the back stood up and were like, woo-hoo-hoo, and like cheering it on, raising their canes up in the sky, and were like, that was sick, So that was the sort of moment of approval that they were like, oh yeah, maybe we're onto something, and that was way back in high school, of course. So that's over 9 years ago. And ever since, actually when we play at home, we do see an interesting mix of age demographics, not that too many older people want to be coming out to a metal show because of the types of crowds and all that. It's not that they're not going to be running around in the circle pit. But we see a lot of their approval on our Facebook and stuff. They go, oh, we love what you boys are doing, keep it up. And it's great to see what you guys do for the culture and for the people and all this and that. So, it's a really cool to sort of, particularly because, like a lot of Polynesian cultures, the age hierarchy is such a rooted part of how these cultures function. It's cool to see the approval from the older generation on a newish concept, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you consider that, heavy metal as a genre literally didn't even has only come into existence probably in the lifespan of some of these guys.
Right.
If they were born
Right.
before the 70s, they have outlived heavy metal up to this
Right.
point. Like,
Yeah, so it's like
yeah.
a totally foreign concept, and but I think for a lot of them too, they know what in the easy answer, like haka.
Mm.
Haka's it's an aggressive performance. Heavy metal is an aggressive performance. It's like, so I think for a lot of these older fellas, they are very well familiar with haka, and obviously that's been around for 1,000 years. And
Mm.
for them, it's just another way. They see it just as another way to push forward these types of performances and aspects of our culture that people so love.
Mm. There's something magic about it, isn't it? Like I'll never forget the first one I saw was from some Kiwi army blokes, and holy shit, it is the most. Being on the, have you ever been on the opposite end of a haka? Have you only ever been the
Yes,
one being the haka?
I have been on the receiving end of less than I have been on the performing end of, for sure. But the one that comes to mind, is my family performed a haka for me actually right after I got my face done. And so, barely made it through that without bursting into tears, as you can imagine it. And they do have this innate powerfulness to them that, like, I think it's one of the reasons why our music can transcend borders is because people, like, they can't explain why they like it. like what part of their soul it sort of touches. They just kind of go, oh my God, they don't even know what we're talking about half the time. And they're like, but why do I feel so drawn to this, So it's a pretty special ability to have, which haka has, haka, not just our music, but haka in general.
Yeah. Now, in reading up in the story behind the title and the mythology, the name Maui came up. Apologies for sounding like the biggest white guy on the planet, but is this the same trickster god that was depicted in Moana?
Sure is. So, Disney's Moana, of course, is a very, as you can imagine, Disneyified version of this deity, demigod. But Maui is a prominent demigod across all of Polynesia. He's not exclusive to Māori people. He's seen all throughout Samoa, all up to Hawaii, and everything in between. And he's kind of like, he's like our Hercules. He completed a bunch of significant feats that created elements of the world around us, So his famous feats were that he fished up the islands of Polynesia. Yeah. And then one of the other famous ones is how he slowed the sun to give us the days. So that was our inspiration for this album, because it's, at least here in New Zealand, it's one of the, if not the first Maui story we get told growing up. There's like a handful, and the slowing the sun is like the very first one I remember being taught in school. And chances are even New Zealanders, regardless of what ethnic background they're from, if they were born and raised here, have probably heard that story at least once in their life. So it's a very nostalgic, very significant mythology, and also makes for some great, artwork and name. And we also have the song, because the full name is Tamanui Te Rā, and so we shortened it to Te Rā for the album title, but Tamanui Te Rā is one of the tracks on the track list in the album.
The album is an absolute monster, dude. I finished it about 20 minutes ago, so nice. Mate, what were some of the biggest challenges in its creation?
Well, this one, for me, significant change is that this was the first album I was a part of from the get-go. So from the full writing process all the way up until recording was, like I mentioned before we started, I was on at the tail end of the second album. So what that does is it introduced a new dynamic. I'm a guitar player. I play bass in the band, but I'm a guitar player. So it means I'm writing songs, I'm writing riffs that I record in the studio, but then our guitarist on stage has to learn like what I wrote and what I recorded, So there's like this interesting dynamic in the sounds and the different techniques and the way we play. We're also like older. Naturally, that's what happens to humans, of course, as we grow up. And although the internet doesn't like to think so, we always joke that like Lewis has been 16 for the past 8 years. They still call us the teenagers from New Zealand. It's like, I'm the oldest, I'm 25, and Lewis is about to be 23. So it's like, we're definitely not teenagers anymore. And with that, though, comes the natural progression of our skill set, as musicians, as vocalists, as people who can absorb the world around us, and that translates into how we write our lyrics from a more mature perspective, or all these things, So there's a lot of elements at play that come together to make this album quite an evolution, I think, for the band. But it was also important that it felt familiar, to fans who have been following since the previous two albums. And then also first time working with veteran producer Josh Wilbur over in LA. It's the first time we had recorded outside of the country, first time we hadn't used the boy's dad, who was our producer previously. So lots of changes. And, at first we were a little nervous going into all these changes, but it's worked out perfectly. And I think it was actually, everything has fallen into place for the better.
What did Josh bring to the table production wise?
Oh man, where do we begin? Obviously he has produced some of the best heavy metal records of the past couple decades, but actually a unique trait, though, that he brought to our album specifically that he had said he was excited to do was, before he was a metal producer, he was a hip-hop producer. And he says a lot of that knowledge he doesn't apply too much to heavy metal because of the nature of the genre. He said, but Lewis is such a good singer that he was able to apply some of his knowledge for pop production in terms of vocal hooks that he isn't used to being able to use in heavy metal, So one of the things he leaned into heavily on this album was making big anthemic, catchy choruses that people can sing along to. And, you know, when he told us this idea, we were like, oh, you have the little metal elitist on your shoulder barking at you going, no, you're going too soft. And then Josh was like, dude, I've produced, you know, Lamb of God, Megadeth, Trivium, and Gojira. You know, he's like, I know heavy when I see it. You know, he's like, who cares? This is going to be great. It's going to be worth it. Just trust me. You know, and we're like, okay, you know, because why would you not listen to him when you get the opportunity to work with someone like that? And, you know, it's turned out great. People, it's one of the, actually in the reviews that we've been reading so far, it's been one of the things that people have praised is these great choruses that, and most part is thanks to Josh's alterations.
Mm. It's well, you can get some incredible things by getting a producer who doesn't normally work in that, or who is famous for working in another genre. You know, Nevermind by Nirvana was famously, you know, Nirvana were a punk band, and they mixed Nevermind as a pop record, like it was a pop record. And here we are.
You know, like, there you are. I know.
Slayer, you know, the Rain and Blood was produced by a guy who was predominantly known for hip hop, Rick Rubin. Right. You know, so who knows? Good music is good music.
Yeah, well, you know, that's ultimately it, you know, and because we also argue now, of course, you know, that was early in the recording process, but like now we're also aware that this is also, despite all this extra melody, the heaviest album yet. I think, you know, there's also more vocal texture on the other end of that spectrum, you know, that we haven't ever done in an album before, and the guitar tones and the guitar tunings are some tones and tunings that we've never done before. So, you know, there's so many different elements at play here with this album that actually we were like, we were being silly dramatic, you know.
You can have a big chorus and be heavy. Look at Strapping Young Lad, massive melodies, and I challenge anyone to make music heavier. Just say Strapping Young Lad is one of their
exactly.
So, mate, looking back over your life so far, what were the albums that changed your life, and why?
Oh man, for me, you know, in my early childhood, it was Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson's Bad. Because what that introduced to me was rhythm. You know, those musicians and Quincy Jones, as in terms of producers, have arguably one of the greatest senses of rhythm that, you know, music has ever seen. And so that cemented early on the concept of groove, you know, because I tend to say the band gets pushed as thrash a lot from the early years, but we've definitely kind of started pulling into this sort of more groove-laden department. You know, we've always had a groove element to us. And to take inspiration for groove, you know, I feel like there's no musicians better than musicians that people dance to, right? You know, because that's where that rhythm, that sense of rhythm comes in. And then later in life, this is less an album, but it was actually Pirates of the Caribbean, and specifically because of Hans Zimmer. And it made me fall in love with all of his music that he's written for film, Gladiator, Interstellar, list them off, you know. But the reason why is because the great thing about a good film score is that if you close your eyes and listen to the song, you should still be able to picture the scene, you know. And for a band that sing in another language, where unless you're either looking at the lyrics on Google or in the booklet when you buy the CD or the LP, or you speak the language, you don't know what we're talking about. So it's like we want to try and apply that concept of, can you listen to the song though and at least feel the flow of the story we're trying to tell, whether that's through the pacing of the song or through external sound effects. You know, we play around a lot on this album with sort of soundscapes and trying to build an idea of the stories at play. You know, and a lot of that comes from Hans Zimmer. And in terms of heavy metal, it was In Waves by Trivium. That was the album specifically Forsake Not the Dream. Was the song that got me into heavy metal guitar playing and heavy metal songwriting when I was, I want to say 12 years old. So over 13 years ago, you know, and that was like my gateway song that's put me here now 13 years later writing songs for a heavy metal band.
it's amazing the long-term effect it can have. Part of me is like, oh, he just made me feel really old. The other part of me is like, Tommy, 39, you are old. Shut the fuck up. But yeah, dude, I was 10 years old in 1995, and I first heard Pantera for the first time, and
Yep.
that was me done. Primal Concrete Sledge was the song, and
Yep.
the guitar and the double kick, and I'm just like, I ruined my
What
life.
is this? Yeah, I know. I know. It has that effect, you know, and you never know when because it was funny when I discovered Trivium. It was a friend of mine playing that song "Forsake Not the Dream" on an acoustic guitar, so I didn't even hear the real song. I just
Yeah.
saw my mate playing this riff on a steel string acoustic, and I was like, "What is that?" As a guitar player, you know.
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh, this is the song called, you know, blah blah blah," and I was like, "You need to show me the song," you know. And that was so I was already in love with it when it was being played by one guy on an acoustic guitar before I'd even delve into the full album and the full sound.
But if that's not a testimony to the strength of a song, then I don't know
I
what
know,
is.
I know.
Yeah. Oh dear. Right. Lastly, I mean, this is a bargain basement question for alien weaponry. I apologize, but look, as it stands now, how would you describe the metal scene in New Zealand?
Ah, so our relationship with the New Zealand metal scene is quite interesting. Actually, we just finished the New Zealand tour, and I think it's kind of reshaped our perspective of what our local metal scene is like. Because in the past, we've had this interesting thing where metal is, you know, not hugely popular here. So it created a small pool, and then the other unfortunate side of it was that the a section, not all of them, but a section of that pool are of a certain political system that they don't like what we do, if
Mm.
that makes sense. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Okay.
So there's a little bit of racism at play. And so, you know, for us, sometimes we felt a little pushed, you know, out. You know, sometimes our radio stations didn't like to play our music and all these sorts of things that really stunted the reach we could get here.
Mm.
But now, since we've just come off this last tour, we've noticed a lot of young people, you know, obviously who have found us through probably social media or something like that, you know. And, you know, we played the show in Queenstown. It was absolutely off the rails. And a big part of that was because there was a couple of, you know, 17-year-olds in the front row going absolutely crazy the whole night, you know. So there's this kind of new wave of Kiwi metalheads that aren't attached to the same racial baggage, I suppose, that's we have experienced in the past, and it's flourishing right now. I think too because metal in general, I think, is kind of in a bit of a mainstream-ish place right now. You know, like it's definitely like a big rise, I think, in things metal, whether it's because of Gojira at the Olympic Games or like Knocked Loose, who did the Jimmy Kimmel, and, you know, bands like Spirit Box, I think, are bringing this pop-infused heaviness to their music, or like Sleep Token that is reaching broader audiences. And, you know, some old grumpy guy is going to be upset at that, but I always think, hey, anyone who's introducing themselves to this side of music and this side of the world can only be a good thing. You know, it's only good news for our once an outcast sort of genre, you know. So I think a lot of that plays in what we just witnessed on our New Zealand tour in this past couple of weeks, which is awesome to see. And for us, a lot more Māori too, because, like, generally speaking, Māori as a people are reggae, R&B, hip hop oriented as a,
Mm.
you know, but we start to see a lot of Māori show up that go, oh, we don't actually listen to metal. We don't even go to metal shows, but we come and watch you guys because we like what you do for our people, you know, which is awesome to see as well. People trying us, and they'll be sitting in the back, you know, they're sitting around the back. They're kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to get in there, but I wanted to come and watch. You know, we had a guy in Auckland say it was the first concert he's ever been to, ever, was our show in Auckland a couple of weeks back. And he loved it, you know, he loved it. Actually, I remember seeing him. He was front row the whole time, you know, and he's like, I don't even listen to metal, but I know about you guys because I seen you on TV or whatever, and I wanted to come check it out. So it's super dope to see the growth that our country's having in terms of our metal scene.
It is. I'm glad that you brought it up because it sounds better when you bring it up as opposed to a bloke who looks like me bringing it up. But every Islander I've ever met has been R&B, like a full blown
Yeah,
R&B
yeah,
head.
it is. And it's that rule is pretty much consistent. Still here as well, and so it's cool to see. Actually, we played this. It's a mixed genre festival called
Okay.
Homegrown in Wellington, and it's one of the only festivals in the country that has a dedicated stage for heavy rock music. And the first year that we played was probably the first year that people complained about the scheduling between the R&B stage and the heavy metal stage. People were on Facebook like, oh, I can't believe Stan Walker and Alien Weaponry are on at the same time. I don't know who I want to go see. We're like, that's never happened before.
Sorry to break your heart, but that's actually amazing.
I know, I know. It was super cool. And so we feel very sort of blessed actually that our people feel like going out of their boundaries to support us because of just what we do from a cultural perspective, regardless of their opinions about the music.
Yeah, mate, I love it. Thank you very much for your time today. This is the album's awesome, and yeah, I'm really loving what you're doing, and I'm loving what you're doing for the community and for just this is awesome. It is all
Uh,
good stuff, man. So
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
easy. And Tracy, our photographer, says you need to hurry the fuck up and get back to Brisbane.
I know. It's been a long time. Last time we were
Yeah,
even in Aussie was Adelaide. We played Froth and Fury Festival
yeah,
out in
yeah.
Adelaide. But that was also like over 2 years ago now. So Aussie is well overdue. Hopefully, with the release of this new music, it means it's time for us to get on the road again.
Oh, you
Fingers
know that
crossed.
is. Excellent. I love it, man. I'll hopefully see you in Brisbane soon.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Thank you for the chat.